I'm Wendell Jones, and welcome to this edition of our program, Jones and Company. On our program, we examine the national issues of the Bahamas, and today on our program, we are pleased to have a guest on our program who is quite adept on the economic situation in our country. We have spoken about the economy of the Bahamas on numerous occasions, and there are many businesses that are struggling. Of course, the financial institutions in the Bahamas probably are still awash with cash, and the international agencies, they come to the Bahamas often to assess what we are doing in our economy. Our guest on the program today is Mr. GowonBowe, who is a Chief Financial Officer at Fidelity Bank, and he has served in many capacities in our country, including the president of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce, among other organizations, the accounting body, Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants.
That's correct.
And so I have his resume in the back of my mind. Thank you so very much for being here, Mr. Bowe.
Always a pleasure.
Good to see you. Dr. Ines, good to see you here today.
Thank you.
Yes. We begin our program today with sad news. We heard about the passing of our late friend, Mr. Bradley Roberts, the former Member of Parliament for Grandstown, and he served in the Christie administration as the Minister of Works and Utilities. And Godfrey Innes, you knew him well.
Very well. I probably knew Bradley from I was about 5 or 6. And we spent our formative years at St. Augustine's. We were classmates. And Bradley was always a mischievous fellow, in a good way. And but overall, Bradley has done exceptionally well as a father and brother, friend. He's an exceptional, and in politics, and he was a very, very successful businessman. I think he was one of the Sunshine Boys and one of the new era Bahamian businessmen. And I think Bradley will have a legacy.
No doubt. Bradley was outstanding in many areas, business especially. As a very young man, he was president of Bahamas Blenders. I believe he must have been in his 30s or something.
No, he's, I think even for young professionals today, certainly will know the story of the investor groups, but his acumen, very strong-willed, opinionated, and I think, to be honest, it's setting a path for how we should be, that there shouldn't be fear around speaking what you believe and giving your views. It doesn't mean everyone has to agree with them, and it doesn't mean you're always right, but elevating the dialogue and discussion was one of the things that you knew him for. And so from that perspective, I think the younger generation will also shed a tear in terms of the passing.
Yeah. We are going to have to do a special program on Bradley Roberts in the next few days or so that we would do justice to his legacy. Yeah. He was a political champion.
Yes, fearless.
He was fierce in his performance as a politician.
He would be missed.
No doubt.
He would be missed.
Very effective former chairman of the Progressive Liberal Party. I think he was chairman emeritus.
Yeah, perhaps probably one of the most effective ones, because he brought direction and order, and most of all, he brought courage.
Yes. And so today we send our condolences to the members of his family and the Progressive Liberal Party on his passing, and we would, of course, be paying a special tribute to Bradley Roberts in the next several days. Mr. Bowe, the economy of the Bahamas. You are in the middle of the arena, really, when it comes to the economy. You should know, you know the economy extremely well, running a bank and being a chartered accountant in our country. How is the economy moving?
You know, in a long time, we can honestly say that there are positive signs. Now, we have to ask ourselves, is that by luck or by actual direction? And when I say that, we have been fortunate in terms of what we've seen in tourism numbers. Some of that has been at the expense of our Caribbean neighbors that have suffered damage in previous hurricanes last year. We've certainly seen redirection of cruise vessels, etc., as various events have taken place. But we've also seen slight uptick in what they're saying is the GDP growth. But I think when we boil it down and we're really talking about how does the society feel in relation to the economy, there's still trepidation, because the way the average person talks about economics is whether or not they feel it in their pocket. And I still think that we have a long way to go in terms of the trickle-down effect. Unemployment is a number that external observers say we really don't have a very good picture on, because we take it in 2 times during the year. And when you look at North America, they publish it on a monthly basis, so that you have an understanding of what I'm going to call the natural ebbs and flows. So we know during certain periods there's lowering of unemployment because of activities that were going on in the past. We know that following the school leavers, that number jumps up because we're not creating jobs fast enough to absorb the school leaver numbers. So we are seeing improvements in the numbers, and then we see a decline, and so that gives mixed reaction. But the average person is still saying that unemployment is still too high, and there aren't sufficient jobs available. And we have to start our mindset to moving away from dependency on what I'm going to say external forces to create activity in the economy. We have to develop a plan that is centric to the Bahamas and Bahamians, that says the foreign direct investment is, if you will, a catalyst to some of the activity we do, but not the centerpiece. It has to be a part of a wider plan where Bahamian entrepreneurship, ownership is at the center plank and not really around the periphery. And I think too often we hear about all of the new developments, and who do you often hear as being the primary shareholder? And we need to have more of the good news story around Bahamian shareholdings that are starting to expand and grow. And we're still seeing a lot of hesitation by businesses because of uncertainty in the economy. So improving, but not to the point where people are now relaxing, if you put it that way.
Where do you see the improvement?
Well, I'll tell you that
yes.
when we stop and look, you do see spending, and I'll give a prime example. We had the VAT increase. There was uncertainty, and the government still has not done so in terms of publishing their analysis that led them to believe that despite increasing it, it wasn't going to create a retardation of the growth or the prospects we were seeing. And in reality, we've gone through it now for 3-4 months, and there hasn't been what I would say a fall off of the cliff. And the only way that happens is if there was upward movement in economic activity, because it means that the individuals have, if you will, gotten to a point of disposable income that they were able to absorb it without, huge removal of kids from schools. That would have been an indicator, because there's right on the doorstep of the opening of the school year, and school fees were right there. You didn't see any huge layoffs or any huge restructuring or resizing by businesses. So persons were at least confident enough to ride out the initial months. And I think from that perspective, you haven't seen what I would say is drastic steps. And so that has to mean that there are positive developments, because you don't see the overly negative reaction to that type of event. Now we have some new developments that may, tip the scale, but I think that was an indicator, even if you weren't an economist. Okay. You had to say that, given that there wasn't that harsh negative reaction, that persons were at least at a level that they were comfortable to be able to absorb it.
Mr. Bowe, last Thursday, there was a news report highlighting the Deputy Prime Minister. And he indicated in that news report that the budget targets were being met or were close to being met in the preliminary. What was your reaction to that?
Well, you know, I smile when you hear commentary about close to target and, you know, we're pleased with the projection and the progress. Usually, you know, facts and figures speak for themselves. So what I would say from that perspective is I'll wait for the actual publication of the numbers because it's all relative. If I'm missing it by 20%, I may say, well, I'm in the right direction, but I'm still 20% off. Whereas if I am very close to hitting it, then that's a different story in the sense of being very aligned. Our budget process, though, until we, what I would say, get into the regular habit of the quarterly reporting, we see very distortive information because we do have peak periods of spending and peak periods of revenue collection. We know that it's often the third quarter of the fiscal year, business license, the real property tax, and a number of other taxes that become due in January to March, April timeframe. So there's a huge amount of revenue that comes in that period. We also know that during the summer months, the spending of government is also at its lowest in the sense that persons are on vacation, things are relatively slow in moving. So if you're talking about the first quarter, we may be very well on target as it relates to expenditure because in reality it doesn't take into consideration what I would say the peak spending and cyclical effects of our budget cycle. And that's not to discredit or to challenge what his assertion is. I think as opposed to speaking about it, we need to get into the habit of saying that we present facts and figures and then we sit and analyze them, because I don't think it'll be sufficient enough to present the numbers and simply leave it without explanation as to why we've achieved certain elements, why we've not achieved elements, what assumptions went into it, what elements are we changing in order to accommodate. And to be honest with you, until we get to accrual-based accounting, where we are actually accounting for things when we commit for them, both on the revenue collection as an expenditure, there's an element of being able to defer payment and things will look okay. And that's what this current administration constantly is speaking about. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they fall into the same traps of saying that you defer your obligations until you have the money to spend. And sometimes that's a distortive picture in terms of where we are at the current point in time.
But Mr. Bowe, you were one of the individuals involved in the creation of a national development plan under the Christie administration. Are you satisfied, Mr. Bowe, that there's a direction to be taken? Do you know what is the strategy for the Bahamas going forward with the present administration? You
know, very candidly, I am very disappointed that we have not seen that national development plan through to fruition. There was a tremendous amount of information that went into the State of the Nation report that highlighted some of the deficiencies we had. Foreign direct investment, the trickle-down effect was less than 20%. That was done through statistical information. So yes, we may have $1 billion coming in, but in reality, less than 200 million of it really impacted the domestic economy. We had a situation where our education system, after grade 3, there was a deterioration in the progress of our students on a national scale. We had information around the state of the inner city as it relates to the family structure, but more important, the social ills that were challenging and coming up. So behind that or preceding that was then the development of how we're going to address these matters and in a holistic fashion. And to be honest, where there is no vision, the people perish. And right now we are not, our biggest challenge in the country is we do not know what our identity is and what we're trying to do holistically. We are reacting to everything that comes up. So we have an external body that criticizes us, we react to that. We have an external or foreign investor that has a plan or development, we react to that. We have another developer who's not reacting or behaving in the manner that we want, and so we intervene and get involved in that investment project. But if you step back and say, well, of all of these, what were the priorities? So what were you intending to do as a nation? We have universal health care that is going to be a topic of much conversation over the next 45 days. That is one that has been in the works for many, many years. And all of these are competing priorities. And if we don't set out a plan that says, this is where we want to see the Bahamas in 25 years, these are the steps that we're going to take over that period of time so that we are clearly articulating to the citizenry, these are the things we're going to do each year. Some things will be deferred, some things will be accelerated, but we will have a barometer to say, are we addressing the things that we believe will get us into a successful Bahamas that we once were? And I think from that perspective, it certainly behooves this government to continue the work that was there. And I think the big thing is, if they really acknowledge what transpired, it was apolitical.
It was apolitical?
Apolitical, because there was, the persons who were there were professionals. The steering committee were individuals that they took from various sectors of society, various groupings, and as well as skill sets and backgrounds. And no one around the table that I sat was interested in whose administration this plan was attached to. This was a national development plan that was going to be for the benefit of the people, and the reality was, it was expected, political parties would have to align with the plan, not the plan align with political parties. And so I think we have to be mature enough as a society to say, I don't care who started, I take pride in seeing something through. And as a nation that is a developing nation, without a plan, a new business, if you think about a new business without a plan, where does it go?
So the point is that we didn't have the kind of continuity in government as we should. We changed administrations.
And pause.
But in terms of continuity in policies and governance, we didn't have it.
Well, part of the irony is part of the National Development Plan, the fourth plank, was governance. And it was speaking to the institutional strength of the civil service, moving to a performance-based appraisal system, moving to accountability, training, and actually having an economic planning unit. And you may say, well, don't we have one of those? We are talking about all these initiatives. Do we not have dedicated resources that are looking at planning our economic future? And the economic or the National Development Plan spoke to those initiatives where we have to move away. We speak about the Westminster system. And for persons, I am old enough to appreciate the satirical comedy, Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. And what it demonstrated was that actually the government was run by the professionals. The policymakers come in with ideas and strategies. Now that one made humor of how their ideas and strategies were set aside, but it demonstrated what was intended to happen, that governments or political parties change in terms of the leadership, but the core stayed the same. And what changed was strategies. And in our Bahama land, our big challenge is, when you go to the US, you know what a Democratic Party represents versus a Republican, whether it be by taxes, social programs. In the UK, you know what the Tories are going to do, you know what Labour is going to do. And so you have
political
a very
philosophy.
clear understanding. In the Bahamas, I keep saying, all of our parties are trying to be center-center. They're not, you know, they want to be capitalists with a social safety net. And we can't be that way. Whilst there are some distinguishing marks, we are trying to be all things to all people. And economic philosophy, from the very beginning of Adam Smith, Karl Marx, the Keynes, right down to Cuba and the communists, all of them have had successes and all of them have had failures. But you needed to take a stand as to which strategy you were going to adopt.
There was a
strategy.
Philosophy and strategy. We have to take a break here. This is Jones and Company, Mr. GowonBowe, our guest on the program. We'll come right back.